Kalix Remora was doing what any curious 10-year-old would do when faced with a shiny alien artifact, poking it with a stick. The fact that this particular stick was a specialized ionic probe he'd borrowed from his mother's lab did little to distinguish him from the countless children throughout human history who just couldn't resist touching things they shouldn't. "I bet it makes cool noises if I press this part," he whispered to himself, squatting behind a cargo container on Proxima Centauri Colony's main docking platform. The sleek Gal'Moran patrol vessel had landed for what they called a routine diplomatic inspection, which everyone knew was really just the Empire flexing its bureaucratic muscles. Their standard procedure involved leaving a small authentication device outside while the crew conducted their business. And now that device was receiving much more attention than its designers had ever intended. The crystalline object pulsed with a soft blue glow, responding to Kalix's gentle prodding in ways that made the boy giggle with delight. His parents, both xenotechnology researchers at the colony's science division, would ground him until the heat death of the universe if they caught him. But some opportunities were worth the risk. Human offspring. A metallic voice suddenly crackled from the device. "Cease interaction with Imperial property." Kalix jumped back, nearly dropping his probe. "Oh, you can talk. This is a Class 3 security interface. Your biometric signature has been recorded." "Cool." Kalix leaned closer, his freckled face reflecting in the crystal's surface. "Can you play any games?" The device's glow intensified. "Warning, unauthorized access detected. Deploying countermeasures." Now, what the Gal'Moran considered countermeasures and what any reasonable species would consider appropriate responses to a child's curiosity were two very different things. The Empire had spent 10,000 years as the undisputed masters of the galactic arm, and their security protocols reflected a certain lack of proportionality. A beam of energy shot upward from the device, a brilliant column of light that seared through the colony's atmospheric shield. "Wow," Kalix exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder at what he assumed was some sort of alarm. Aboard the patrol vessel, Commander Zilktar's primary heart sac pulsated with irritation. The security alert had interrupted his enjoyment of a particularly fine fermented nutrient paste, and now the ship's defense systems were activating without proper authorization. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" he demanded, his four-eye stalk swiveling toward the tactical officer. "Security breach at the authentication node, Commander," the officer responded. "Our systems have identified a deliberate infiltration attempt using human technology." Zilktar's secondary heart sac now joined the first in agitated pulsing. "Humans? Attempting to access our systems? Preposterous. They're barely more advanced than their own livestock." The tactical display showed a small figure near their authentication device, clearly using some kind of tool to interface with it. "Sabotage," Zilktar declared with the absolute certainty of someone who has never been wrong because their society executes the bearers of contradictory evidence. "They're testing our defenses. Eliminate the threat." "But Commander, the biometric signature indicates." "I said eliminate." Outside, Kalix was trying to figure out how to make the pretty light show happen again when the patrol ship's forward cannon swiveled toward him with mechanical precision. His last thought, before the particle beam reduced him to his component atoms, was mild disappointment that he wouldn't get to tell his friends at school about the cool alien tech. Earth Central Command was having what military historians would later euphemistically call a significant emotional event, which is to say, a room full of humanity's top military and political leaders were collectively losing their shit. They did what? President Eliza Conway's voice cracked as she slammed her palm against the obsidian conference table. The holographic transmission from Proxima Centauri flickered slightly at the impact. Colony Governor Hansen looked as though he hadn't slept in days, which in fact, he hadn't. The Gal'Moran patrol eliminated a human child who was apparently examining one of their authentication devices. They're claiming it was a regrettable security response to detected infiltration. Admiral Tessa Blackwood sat perfectly still at the far end of the table. her face a mask of professional calm that completely betrayed the supernova of rage building behind her gray eyes. Only the slight whitening of her knuckles as she gripped her stylus indicated anything amiss. "And the child was?" she asked, her voice like ice with nuclear fusion at its core. "Kalix Remora, age 10. His parents are both researchers in our xenotech division." The room fell silent. 10 years old. Using a tech probe, probably. Curious and bright, just like Blackwood shut down that thought before it could fully form. "The Gal'Moran diplomatic vessel will arrive in 12 hours, Secretary of State Williams said, breaking the heavy silence. "They're sending a third-tier diplomatic adjunct to resolve the unfortunate incident." President Conway's laugh was sharp enough to cut diamond. "They kill one of our children and send a glorified intern to smooth it over? Do they really think so little of us?" "Yes," Blackwood answered simply. "They do." All eyes turned to the Admiral. "The hegemony has categorized us as a Class 4 civilization, pre-unified, pre-expansion, technologically adolescent. They consider us somewhere between amusing pets and potential servants." She set down her stylus with deliberate care. "They have no idea who we really are." President Conway studied the Admiral for a long moment. "I believe it's time they learned. Admiral Blackwood, you have authorization to execute Protocol Prometheus." Williams choked on his water. "Madam President, that's..." The only appropriate response, Conway finished for him. "They killed a child, Thomas. One of our children." Admiral Blackwood stood, straightening her immaculate uniform. "I'll need to make some calls." As she left the room, the President called after her, "Tessa, make them regret it." The Admiral didn't turn around, but her voice carried clearly. "Oh, they already do. They just don't know it yet." The Gal'Moran diplomatic vessel was a masterpiece of overcompensation, all gleaming spires and pulsating light arrays designed to remind lesser species of their place in the cosmic hierarchy. It docked at Earth's orbital station with the smug confidence of an empire that had never known true defeat. Diplomatic adjunct Vorex preened his sensory filaments as he prepared to disembark. He'd been briefed on the primitive humans, emotional, unpredictable, but ultimately harmless. This assignment was beneath his talents, but he'd use it as a stepping stone to greater things. Pacify the monkeys, return home a hero. The Earth delegation awaiting him consisted of only 3 people, a silver-haired woman in a business suit, a tall man in military dress, and a smaller woman in a lab coat. How delightfully primitive they didn't even bring a proper entourage. "Greetings, Earth representatives," Vorex intoned, his translation module converting his natural ultrasonic whistles into human speech. "I am Diplomatic Adjunct Vorex, 63rd rank of the glorious Gal'Moran Hegemony, eternal light of the 17 sectors." The silver-haired woman didn't bother introducing herself. "Let's skip the pageantry. You killed a child." Vorex's filaments twitched in annoyance. No proper protocol at all. A regrettable security response. The offspring interfered with Imperial technology. His name was Kalix. The military man said quietly. Yes. The designation is immaterial." Vorex waved a limb dismissively. "I am authorized to offer compensation of 200 Imperial credits, equivalent to approximately 50,000 of your Earth dollars. A generous sum for a single offspring, considering your reproductive capabilities." The woman in the lab coat actually laughed, though the sound contained no humor whatsoever. 50,000? For a human life? For a child? Vorex was growing irritated with these emotional displays. "I can increase to 300 credits, but I must insist we conclude this matter expeditiously. The Supreme Commander has more pressing concerns than the termination of a single pre-contributor from a non-aligned world." The silver-haired woman, presumably some kind of leader, stepped forward. "Allow me to introduce ourselves properly. I am President Eliza Conway, elected leader of Earth and all human colonies. This is Admiral Tessa Blackwood, commander of our defense forces. And this is Dr. Lyra Chen, our chief synapsychologist." Vorex's sensory filaments went rigid. A planetary leader? For such a trivial matter? Perhaps these humans were more hierarchical than intelligence had suggested. What my diplomatic colleague is trying to say, President Conway continued with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, is that you have no idea what you've just done, do you? Before Vorex could respond, Admiral Blackwood tapped something on her wrist device. Throughout the docking bay, hidden panels slid open in the walls, revealing weapon emplacements that definitely weren't on any blueprint shared with the hegemony. What is the meaning of this? Vorex sputtered, his translation module struggling with his suddenly heightened pitch. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her voice clinically detached. For the past 48 Earth hours, we've been analyzing your vessel. It's quite impressive, really. 63 separate systems that could be considered critical. Would you like to know how many of them are still under your control right now? Vorex's secondary brain began to throb with alarm signals. This is outrageous. The hegemony the hegemony, Admiral Blackwood interrupted, is about to have a very bad day. Supreme Commander Drex Vall was enjoying his evening meal when all 17 communication screens in his private chamber activated simultaneously. This was, by definition, impossible. The redundant systems were designed specifically to prevent such an occurrence. Yet there they were, all displaying the same image, a human female with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe knot, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. Who dares breach the Supreme Commander's private chambers? He demanded, rising from his nutrient bath. Admiral Tessa Blackwood, Earth Defense Force, the human responded calmly. We need to discuss the murder of Kalix Remora. Drex Vall's feeding tentacles curled in disgust. I do not conduct diplomacy with primitive species. A diplomatic adjunct has been dispatched to resolve the security incident. The human's expression didn't change. Yes, Adjunct Vorex. He's currently our guest. Rather more permanently than he anticipated. A cold sensation spread through Drex Vall's primary circulatory system. Explain yourself. With pleasure. The human tapped something off screen. As we speak, Operation Orpheus is being initiated throughout Gal'Moran space. Perhaps you'd like to check your military communication channels? Drex Vall gestured to a subordinate, who immediately activated the command console. Nothing happened. Having technical difficulties? Blackwood asked, with what the Supreme Commander recognized as the human expression of smile. It was not reassuring. That would be because approximately 37% of your command staff aren't actually Gal'Moran loyalists. Some are humans in disguise. Others are members of species you've subjugated who've been waiting for this moment for generations. Impossible. Drex Vall roared. Our genetic screening would detect. Your genetic screening was designed by Dr. Max Paltier 18 cycles ago, Blackwood interrupted. Dr. Paltier has been a human deep cover agent for 22 cycles. His real name is Dr. Robert Chen. He says hello, by the way. For the first time in his 300-cycle existence, Supreme Commander Drex Vall felt fear. What do you want? He demanded, abandoning pretense. Justice, Blackwood replied simply. But first, a demonstration. All screens shifted to display what appeared to be empty space. Then the perspective pulled back to reveal the massive form of the hegemony's primary defense platform orbiting Gal'Mor Prime. As Drex Vall watched in horror, the platform's weapon systems activated, turned inward, and began systematically destroying the very installation they were designed to protect. We control 28 of your 34 major defense platforms, Blackwood informed him as the screens returned to her face. The self-destruct sequences have already been initiated on the others. But how? We are the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. The human's laugh was short and entirely devoid of humor. No, you're just the most arrogant. You've spent so long believing yourselves superior that you never bothered to verify it. While you were dismissing us as primitives, we were studying you, infiltrating you, and preparing for the day you inevitably crossed the line. All this for one human child? Drexval couldn't comprehend it. Admiral Blackwood leaned closer to the camera, her eyes cold as the void. Yes, one child. Because that's the difference between us, Commander. You see a single dispensable life. We see the entire reason civilization exists in the first place. Captain Darian Varick of the Earth vessel Nemesis was having entirely too much fun for someone currently engaged in interstellar warfare. Oh, come on, is that really the best the mighty hegemony can do? He cackled as another Gal'Moran cruiser exploded spectacularly off the Nemesis's port bow. They're still using predictive targeting algorithms from 3 centuries ago. His XO, Commander Jalil Hassan, maintained his professional demeanor despite the captain's theatrical display. Sir, the Gal'Moran flagship is attempting to engage their dimensional drive. Not today, Varick sang out, spinning in his command chair like a deranged ballerina. Ensign Park, do the thing. Ensign Park, long accustomed to the captain's unorthodox command style, initiated the dimensional inhibitor field without comment. On the main view screen, the massive Gal'Moran flagship Eternal Dominion shuddered as its drive systems failed. Energy discharges rippled along its ornate hull like lightning. "Attention, Gal'Moran vessel," Varick announced, suddenly all business. "This is Captain Darian Varick of the Earth Defense Force. Your dimensional drive has been disabled, your weapon systems are offline, and your life support is running on backup power. Also, your Rear Admiral has terrible taste in music. Yes, we hacked your personal entertainment files too." Commander Hassan cleared his throat. "Sir, perhaps we could maintain some professional." "Oh, loosen up, Jalil," Varick waved dismissively. "We've spent 30 years preparing for this moment. Allow me some theatrics." The view screen flickered, and the bulbous form of a Gal'Moran ship commander appeared. "This is Rear Admiral Claw Vex of the Hegemony. Your attack on Imperial forces is an act of war. Surrender immediately or face annihilation." Varick's grin was positively predatory. "My dear Admiral Claw Vex, this isn't the beginning of a war. This is the end of one. A war you've been losing for decades without ever realizing it was being fought." With a dramatic gesture entirely for his crew's benefit, Varick activated the ship's main tactical display. All across Gal'Moran space, red indicators showed Imperial installations going dark, ships losing power, and defense systems turning against their creators. "You see, Admiral, while your empire was busy playing Galactic bully, humanity was playing a much longer game. Every technology you've developed in the past 50 years has a backdoor. Every security system has a flaw. Every command structure has our people embedded within it." Admiral Claw Vex's eye stalks trembled with rage. "Impossible. You're a pre-interstellar civilization." Varick laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. "Oh my God, you actually believed that? We achieved faster than light travel in 2157. We've had dimensional pocket technology since the early 2300s. We just let you think we were still planet-bound because it was more convenient that way. But the inspection team's your primitive infrastructure. Movie sets," Varick said with a dismissive wave. "Literally. We hired entertainment designers to create convincing primitive human colonies whenever you came knocking. The real colonies are hidden in dimensional pockets. Did you really think a species that went from horse-drawn carriages to moon landings in under 70 years would take 3 centuries to develop interstellar travel?" The Gal'Moran admiral seemed to be having difficulty processing this information. Why maintain such a deception? Captain Varick's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by something cold and ancient. "Because we studied your history. We saw how you treated species you considered equals. It's not a great track record, so we decided to fly under the radar until we were ready." He leaned forward in his chair. "And then you killed a child. Now we're ready." In a secure bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Himalayan mountains, Dr. Lyra Chen monitored the progress of what would later be called the 6-Hour War. The holographic displays showed the systematic dismantling of the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known, all proceeding exactly according to the plan she'd helped design decades ago. Phase 3 is complete, her assistant reported. The proxy uprisings have secured control of 17 key hegemony worlds. Minimal casualties on all sides. Chen nodded, making a note on her tablet. And the psychological warfare campaign? Exceeding projections. The leaked archives detailing hegemony atrocities against member species have triggered governmental collapses on 23 worlds. Their own people are demanding justice. Good. Chen studied the central display showing the Gal'Moran homeworld. And our primary objective? The assistant allowed herself a small smile. The commander who gave the order to fire on Kalix Remora has been taken into custody by his own people. They're offering him as a gesture of reconciliation. Chen's expression remained neutral, but satisfaction radiated from her like heat from a star. Years of planning, decades of patient infiltration and preparation, all for this moment. Not for revenge, humans had evolved beyond such simple motivations, but for justice, for accountability. Her communicator chimed with a priority message from Admiral Blackwood. Lyra, the Admiral's voice was tight with controlled emotion. It's time for the final phase. Are you ready? I've been ready for this my entire career, Tessa, she replied, gathering her materials. Not requested. Begged. There was a grim satisfaction in Blackwood's voice. The greatest empire in known space lasted exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes against an enemy they thought was still figuring out fusion power. Chen gathered her tablet and straightened her jacket. History is replete with empires that confuse technological superiority with actual civilization. They all make the same mistake eventually. And what's that? Blackwood asked, though Chen suspected she already knew the answer. They forget that the true measure of advancement isn't in the weapons you can build, Chen said, stepping into the transport chamber that would take her to the orbital diplomatic station. It's in the restraint you show in using them. The conference room aboard Earth's orbital diplomatic station had been designed specifically for this moment. The circular table was an exact replica of King Arthur's round table, a deliberate message that all parties would meet as equals. The room's walls displayed scenes from human history, the signing of the Magna Carta, the United Nations formation, the Mars Accords. Supreme Commander Drex Vial entered flanked by what remained of his high command, a pathetic showing of 4 nervous officials whose eye stalks darted continuously around the room, leaning as if expecting an attack. Admiral Blackwood, President Conway, and Dr. Chen were already seated, along with representatives from 7 formerly subjugated species who had allied with humanity during the brief conflict. Let's dispense with formalities, President Conway began once everyone was seated. The Gal'Moran Hegemony, as it has existed for the past 10 millennia, ends today. Drex Vial's feeding tentacles twitched with suppressed rage, but he made no protest. Earth does not seek your territory, your resources, or your destruction, Conway continued. What we require is transformation. The terms are non-negotiable. Dr. Chen activated the display in the center of the table, projecting the document that would reshape galactic civilization. First, a galactic council will be established, with equal representation from all sentient species, regardless of technological advancement. Second, all political prisoners will be released, and those responsible for crimes against sentient beings will face justice before an interspecies tribunal. Third, the Gal'Moran military will be reduced by 80%, with the excess resources redirected toward reparations for subjugated worlds. Fourth, all species will have access to the technological database of the former hegemony, ending the artificial suppression of advancement. And finally, Admiral Blackwood took over, her voice like tempered steel. Commander Zilktar will be surrendered to Earth authorities to face trial for the murder of Kalix Remora. Drex Vial's massive form seemed to deflate. And if we refuse? Blackwood's smile was terrifying in its gentleness. You misunderstand, Commander. This isn't a negotiation. Your empire ceased to exist 6 hours ago. These terms are a courtesy, our way of offering your species a path to redemption rather than extinction. You would destroy us over one child? One of the Gal'Moran officials gasped. Dr. Chen answered, her voice calm and clinical. No, we would destroy you over your response to killing one child. There's a difference. The documentation has been prepared, President Conway said, sliding a tablet toward Drex Vol. Your genetic signature is required. With a final, defeated slump of his sensory appendages, Supreme Commander Drex Vol, the last leader of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known, pressed his primary appendage to the document. 1 year later, Admiral Tessa Blackwood stood alone at the memorial of the innocent on what had once been the steps of the Gal'Moran Imperial Palace. The gleaming black monument bore the names of every confirmed victim of hegemony aggression throughout its 10,000-year history, millions of names etched in microscopic text that spiraled around a central pillar. At eye level, a single name stood out in larger letters, Kalix Remora. I thought I might find you here, Dr. Chen said, approaching quietly from behind. Blackwood didn't turn. The new council chambers are impressive. Very democratic. You skipped the ceremony. I had more important matters to attend to. Blackwood reached out to touch the engraved name. He would have been 11 next week. Chen stood beside her friend in silence for a moment. His parents are doing well. They've established the Kalix Foundation for Interspecies Understanding. It's already making a difference. Blackwood nodded, her expression distant. Good. That's good. Tessa, Chen said gently, you can't keep carrying this alone. The burden isn't yours. Isn't it? Blackwood's voice was barely audible. Operation Orpheus was my design. Protocol Prometheus was my contingency. For 30 years, I prepared for war while praying it would never come. And in 6 hours, you prevented conflicts that might have raged for centuries, Chen reminded her. The galaxy is at peace for the first time in recorded history. Blackwood finally turned to face her friend, eyes shining with unshed tears. Did I ever tell you why I joined the military, Lyra? No. I had a daughter. Elaine. She was 7 when the first Gal'Moran scout ships visited Earth. There was an incident and overzealous security response. They called it. She was just curious. An understanding dawned on Chen's face. Tessa, I never knew. No one did. It was classified. The government covered it up, afraid of provoking the advanced aliens. I was just a lieutenant then, powerless. Blackwood's hands clenched at her sides, so I made myself powerful. I worked my way up. I designed Operation Orpheus, and I waited for the day they would make the same mistake again. Chen placed a hand on Blackwood's shoulder. It wasn't revenge, Tessa. It was justice. The line gets blurry sometimes. Blackwood took one last look at the memorial. But you know what's kept me going this past year? Watching the former hegemony species learning what humans have known since we first huddled around fires in caves. And what's that? Admiral Blackwood turned away from the monument and, looking toward the gleaming spires of the new Galactic Council headquarters, where representatives of 100 species now work together. That the true measure of civilization isn't how it treats its equals, she said quietly, but how it treats its children.